Hello, everybody. This is Diane, and welcome to another edition of dDTAlks. Listen, guys, if you're just joining us, I want you to do something for me. Share, go ahead and share, tag, and invite someone because we have an interesting topic today that you absolutely do not want to miss. All right, so I'm going to take a few minutes. I want to share this cast with as many people as possible. Our topic today is second chances on returnees who are incarcerated or have been incarcerated, and they are returning back into civilian life, back into the regular society. How does that function? What is life like? Are there any challenges? As you understand, there's great disparities between the Black Hispanic versus the white community that get incarcerated in America. The statistics are alarming. So I have with me some experts who are in the field, on the ground, doing a lot of work in that domain. So I'm going to quickly introduce to you who I have in the studio with me. I have Miss Sheila A. Murphy. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you so much.
And I have Mr. Gerard Brown. Welcome today.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm happy to have you guys. Sheila is a chief mobilizer, and she's mobilizing the returnees, and she's an author and a trainer as well. And then Mr. Brown is the DC Health Program Manager, and he's also a returning citizen. So this is quite exciting for us today. So Sheila, while we are at it, can you go ahead and tell me a little bit, how did you even get started with this? Like, what was the motivation? What was the inspiring thing? Or perhaps maybe you should describe what the program is.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So I'm the CEO of Mission to Mobilization and the president of Release for Life. And we are our primary goal really is to change the way the nation sees returning citizens. Mm-hmm. And so the work that we're primarily doing right now is to expose a message. We want to have people go through the experience simulation, and we want to expend resources around this issue of changing the school to prison pipeline, and I can talk a little bit more about that in a little bit.
Because that's a big word.
Yeah,
that's a big,
right. Well, I mean, just briefly, just to say, the school to prison pipeline basically was a study that was done probably maybe 15, 20 years ago, where they those that created prisons looked at the test scores of third grade black boys to determine how many prisons they were going to build. If you do it right, you can Google school to prison pipeline, and that data will pop up. It's alarming. To me, it was insane.
That they're still going to build.
They're building prisons based on test scores of black boys, third grade black boys.
My God, that's disturbing.
It's very disturbing. And so, to your original question, test scores of black boys. I started going to jails and prisons maybe in my early mid-20s. I'm just going with my church, mm-hmm. and just had a heart for wanting to really do what I believe that the Word of God was saying. And as I continue to go, I was compelled to see, number one, there were people that I felt like really wanted to change. Maybe somebody would say, okay, well, while they're in, yes, they do, they look like they want to. But as when I would come out and provide training, so often they would tell me, Miss Sheila, it feels as though the word prison is written across our forehead.
Right.
Because when we get out, people discriminate against us for a number of reasons. Mm-hmm. Jobs, housing, food, voting rights. And my heart just continued to be, pressed to want to do something about it.
Yeah, and the funniest thing is that those facilities, a lot of them are called correctional facilities.
Right.
So are they really are people really going in there and coming out feeling like they've learned any correctional values, any things that would properly reintegrate them into society?
Well, I can't speak for every correctional facility, but I mean the thought really is that no, they're not correcting behavior, and that the objective is not to change and correct the way the inmates are behaving. It is really more for profit. It has become a money maker for the prison industrial complex. I mean, it's a $1 billion industry.
Absolutely. The money part of it, we're going to talk about it. We have to expand on that because historically, it has really always been about the money. If you look at the case of the South, down South, it was really about the money exchange. I think, and now it's even for beds, per bed, how many people you have per bed in a facility is the money, and they're being contracted out. Those facilities are being given to private corporations, private organizations to run. So it is about the money. It's not even about the individuals who are serving time, and nobody really cares about them, what's going on when they come out. Good behavior, I don't even know if good behavior is really pays off per se.
Right.
And then, Gerard, let me get your perspective. I know for you, you have a different experience. You're coming in from a different background as far as this topic is concerned. Right now, you're a program manager, health manager. Maybe you share a little bit about that. Is that connected to this particular program as well, or that's just an individual career path?
Individual career path.
Career path, okay. Did you want to say something else?
No, I thought you asked questions. Like,
I will ask.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So and then you're also a returning citizen in the past, many years ago.
Correct.
So maybe give me a little bit of, let's go into your first experience as finding yourself on the other side of the system, how you got caught up, and perhaps how that journey was for you.
So I was so young when I started going to jail.
Right.
You know, it was like 11 or 12 years old. So
Wow.
I did not get a chance to acquire a lot of things, like a house. I didn't lose a house. I didn't lose a car, you know, because I was so young. And where in the 70s, early 70s, where all the way through the 70s, where I grew up at, it was a culture, you know, and people, they felt okay, you know, selling drugs, stealing, you know, stealing cars, and that was a career path, you know. So back then, I knew that by doing these things, I was going to jail.
Right. So
So
you
I
already knew in the back of your mind that it was part of the process.
That's part of the process.
And it didn't scare you, nothing about it scared you that you were going to end in jail.
No, actually, I was sort of looking forward to it. You know, I guess to get my stripes. You know, and because
Right.
that's a part of the learning process. You know, you go to juvenile jail. You know, and then you graduate. You go to the adult jail, and then you go to the penitentiary. You know, then you go to the federal penitentiary. You know, it's a process. You know, and I did all of those
Wow.
at an early age. You know, and when I started thinking about this, when I was asked to do it, you know, about the challenges, you know, and I thought about the last time that I got out of jail. And that was different from all the other times because there's too many to count. All the other times I got out, it was different, you know, because I went back.
Right.
You know? So the last time I had, and I guess we'll get to that, but the times before I got out, when I first started going, it was, you know, looking for when I come back, see you later. You know, I'm coming back. You know, so then when I got a little older, I didn't really want to go to jail. You know? So
As you got older.
right, in adult jail, when the door slammed, you know, and you're in there by yourself, you know, and then, you know, I said, I'm not coming back.
Okay.
And I said that so many times.
But you still found yourself going back.
Going back because I didn't know how to break the circle. You know, so like they say, if you stand around a hot dog stand long enough, you're gonna buy a hot dog. You know, and what I did was I wanted to not come back to jail, but as soon as the door opened, I forgot all about that. I'm right down on the corner where everybody else. You know, in just a matter of time, I was arrested.
I mean, like,
Yeah, no, and I was just gonna say, just the whole culture of even when you were young, how the mentality was it was okay.
Right.
You know, if you don't see anything different, if you don't see anything better, then you think that it's okay. And then once you're incarcerated, then everybody in there is feeling the same way. And then when you come out, if we fast forward even to now, then you have the challenge of the same environment that you're
coming back to face the same things that
the same mentality, the same people, you know, the same structure. So there is not a new way of thinking. There's not a greater expectation to do anything better than what you've done before. And so it's unfortunate, and really that's tied into, you know, our work in terms of the community has to change, and the community people and really even families have to identify that this is not okay, first of all,
right,
and that it's taking life from us. One other thing I don't want to miss here, you know, is how important it is that we look at mass incarceration, you know, from the 80s. Michelle Alexander talks about, you know, in the new Jim Crow, that
it is a new Jim Crow.
It is a new Jim Crow. And basically in the 80s, and maybe on the tail end of when Mr. Brown was in and out of jail and prison, that you know, crack cocaine was put into our communities, and that was a form of income for poor, marginalized, disenfranchised Black people.
Right.
So that was a way of life. They did not know anything different. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, to expand on that. Yeah, because and the alcohol and the liquor stores, a lot of liquor stores were put in those communities.
That's right.
And what do you resort to? If you're drinking, the next thing is you just keep wanting more and more. You get addictions stem from that. I know earlier on you talked about, you know, being what happened to the screen? Okay, we're not gonna get distracted about that.
But Didi, you know what?
Yeah.
The other thing when you're saying about drinking and alcohol, it's a coping mechanism.
It is.
Because think about it, if you even look at like animals in a cage, you become depressed and miserable because you cannot get out.
You can't get out of your natural habitat. You know, everything around you does not inspire. Nothing is really inspiring. It's like the day to day you wake up, what is there that you're really looking forward to?
That's right.
So I'm really wondering, as a 12-year-old though, what is the mindset? I mean, a 12-year-old being sent into a jail, I feel like, I mean, a 12-year-old, you really need is discipline at home. You know, maybe you're stubborn and stuff, but how does a 12-year-old end up in that kind of system? Like, I mean, what are the things that jeopardize the life of a 12-year-old though?
The environment. You know, so for me, I was shy. You know, and when I used drugs, it changed me.
Right.
You know, I could talk to females. I could do things that I couldn't do when I was not high.
Right.
You know, so I continued to get high. You know, and all the other things came along with it. You know, the jails. I remember I had a picture with me and a group of guys. You know, when people get high, you know, they nod.
Right.
You know, and it was cool to nod. You know, we took a picture posing, nod. and I never had any drugs. You know, and I seen the older guys around nodding. You know, and I thought that was cool. You know, and that's sick, but I thought it was cool. You know, that's what I seen. And not only that, my father was a hustler. You know, and you asked me before, you know, with my family, you know, were we poor? We were not really poor. You know, we had, like I said, my grandfather was an activist. He was on Roosevelt's cabinet. You know, my grandmother was a school teacher. My uncle was a judge. He retired in Boston. You know, my father, on the other hand, he was a hustler.
Yeah.
You know, he was out there. He's well known. You know, but I was my own best customer. You know, I couldn't do what he did. You know, and I started using just spiraled down.
So you didn't. I mean, you wanted to emulate him, but you didn't have the skills, the necessary skills, to perhaps excel as well as he did, because he kind of had his way around the game But you just
the skills, and like I said, I was shy, you know, and the drugs made me different,
Right.
you know, and so that stopped me from using drugs as a business.
right.
You know, it made me whole. You know, so I used the drug, and then the cycle started. You know,
The
And I
vicious
just-
cycle.
Yeah, I mean, it's strange. It wasn't vicious back then. You know,
It wasn't vicious.
No, it was.
You didn't,
It didn't
see,
feel
no,
like it.
You
Right.
didn't feel like it. It was though, because you are getting in there. You come out and then you find
going
yourself
back
in the
in.
same thing
in
Right.
the beginning.
in the beginning. Okay.
It was not vicious.
Okay.
It was fun.
Oh, for you it was fun.
Right, for me. And again, you know, and Sheila talked about, you know, the people what they lose and all that stuff. I was young.
Right.
I was 12
You
years
had no
old.
assets and
Right.
everything. But here's how I would say it was still vicious, because you were perhaps losing education, you were losing time, you were losing family. Your family members felt, you know, it was a burden on them.
And
To
losing
you-
life.
And losing life, possibly. You were lucky, you lucked out. But I'm sure there were people in there who perhaps there's illnesses, you know, you die from different, you know, you're predisposed to so many other conditions that you
In jail.
narrowly escape.
Yeah, you get stabbed and
Yeah,
get killed. Yeah.
exactly.
And when I say losing life, I mean by losing the quality of life.
Exactly.
You know, because like you said, you don't have the education, you don't have the opportunities to be able to do the things that you could do as a vibrant young 12-year-old young black man. You know, there's many things that you could have done and been able to see, but you weren't able to do that because you were using drugs.
Right. And earlier we talked, and it wasn't just my environment, because some people lived in my neighborhood, in my environment, that didn't use drugs.
Right. That
You know,
excel.
and they went to school, they graduated, all that stuff, you know. So it wasn't that. It was something in me. Now, later they could have, you know, started using drugs, alcohol, but you know they didn't at that time. You know, they didn't see the world like I saw it.
Right. But the good thing is that at some point you eventually have that turning point where, you, like you say, you got to a point in life where you say, you know what, enough is enough. But you did say that many times, and you come out and you're not equipped.
Right.
But one last time, the final time, there is a system in place for you. Let us know a little bit about that program that changed the trajectory for you.
So the program is a residential treatment program, and it was called Second Genesis. You know, and you went there. You know, you requested, you asked the judge for leniency. You know, I want to get help. I have a drug problem. Can you send me to the program instead of send me to jail? You know, and some people use that just as a way to get out. You know, and so Second Genesis has a support. And it teaches you from almost like a baby to grow up, you know, and it teaches all these things, how to behave and how to talk, you know, how to get a job, how to do a resume, and they were there for you because they had groups, therapeutic groups, sessions,
Right.
you know, and individual staff,
Counselors.
you know, and so that was there. It was not no bars and no locks. The only locks were to keep people from coming in. You were free to go anytime you wanted.
Wow.
You know, and so you if I was young, if I didn't get there when I got there, I would have left. You know, but I was ready, you know, to make a change.
Right.
And then I saw some people, you know, the first time I was in the hospital, and they had NA groups. You know, and you know, these ex-addicts, you know, they gave those groups, they hold those groups. So they came in the jails and hospitals and rehab centers. So, I was in the hospital, and I went to a group.
Okay.
You know, and I saw some people that were out there with me.
Wow.
With new shoes on and looking clean. You know?
Wow. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, you know, but so that wasn't the end yet. You know, but I seen that, and I had that in me. You know, so when I got the second Genesis, the judge allowed me to go and get some help.
Right.
I was ready. I was open. So I had to make some changes. Was it hard? Sometimes. You know, was it worth it? Yes.
Absolutely.
And then you had role models in there. So, and I was telling Sheila earlier, everything I got, somebody helped me.
Wow.
So that's why when she asked me at 1 o'clock in the day, when I come, you know, it was meant for me to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you
Yeah,
came, because
yeah.
when Sheila was talking about this, I was like, I really wish we could have someone who is sharing the other side, you know,
That's
because
right.
you as someone who is initiating these programs, going in there and implementing them, you don't really know the extent to which you know the
Real.
program, you know how beneficial it is. I mean, you hear the
Well,
stories,
you hear the stories,
testimonies,
right, but it's
sometimes
different when
it's
it's-
good for people to hear firsthand.
Right.
Like, you know,
Live
I'm a
Right, the life experience.
yes, yeah, that has been there on both sides, and you're also benefiting from programs like this. But Sheila, I mean, right now you,
Yeah, I was just gonna say one other to a point when I initially mentioned about how the school to prison pipeline, and how Mr. Brown mentioned that, you know, he was 12 years old, 11, 12 years old when he first started being incarcerated. It goes back to the point of the cycle begins early.
Right.
It starts at very young, and I've heard, you know, people say 8 and 9 years old. They start off as runners, or they start off just testing, just trying, just hanging
they
around.
feel discouraged. You fail 1 or 2 tests. There's no one that to encourage you and says,
Right.
okay,
Right.
Like, you just, you know, we would just get more help. You know, you start feeling like, I'm not even good at this,
Right.
so I might as well just do what everybody else
And
is
then
doing.
just hang with other people,
Yeah,
maybe
there's-
hang with older boys, you know, or other kids that maybe make you feel more like a family and feel more accepted by this other group. You know, getting high, his point of it, you know, doing drugs made him feel less shy, and so but they start early. The point that I want to make is that it starts early. The target is early, and it's critical that the community understands that we have to make sure that we're taking care of
The
our children.
intervention has to begin
It has
really
really-
young. I mean, you
yes.
can't take chances.
That's right.
You can't say, oh, you know, I'm going to wait until maybe when they're in high school and start talking to them. No,
Yeah, it's too
the
young.
values have to get in from young. No child is
That's
too
right.
young
That's
to
right.
get those lessons.
That's right.
Really.
That's right.
So I think the people in my neighborhood that didn't go the route that I went had that support, that family. Remember, my father was a dealer.
Right.
You know, he was hardly home. You know, and he had other women. You know, and I knew it, and I, you know, and my mother, bless her heart, you know, but she was a housewife
Right.
for a long time, and she just a drink. You know, I guess to deal with what's going on. You know,
Right.
so I didn't have a family, a traditional family. I can go home, we sit around the dinner table. And,
Or question you. You were not accountable. No one
Yeah.
could hold you accountable and say, you didn't
was
go to
school,
school,
right.
you know, like, can I see your grades? Because, I mean, you're coming home to mom who is not like 100%. Maybe she's just like, she has to deal with a man who is not around. She doesn't have her
Yeah,
own skill
he-
set,
he
is not
beat her.
working. Exactly. You see domestic violence, you know,
Exactly.
she's being abused, battered, and then she has kids to raise and still depending on him even though he's not around. So you have to depend on that money. So basically the kids, you guys, you're loose. And that's what happens. There's a leakage, and then you fall into the trap of the system, really.
So that's what people need, you know, as far as support, not to go that route. But and you know, and I was telling Sheila earlier that I know some people that been in jail for 20 years and came out, you know, and some are still out, you know, and some not so lucky, you know, and the same reasons, you know, what I heard was that the one in particular that went back because he couldn't get a job, you know, and his wife was working, but he wasn't putting his part, you know, so he eventually went back, you know, got a parole violation and went back to jail. You know, but some people with a support system in place like Catholic charities, that they are real good and they help a lot of people, and they give people opportunity, they give people jobs,
Right.
And that helps people a lot if you have that.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I know. So many things. And so, what I want to be able to say is, and God bless the great organizations that are out here trying to assist, but we need that and then some, because the community as a whole has to come around individuals. So if we just use, Mr. Brown's case in point, there probably were neighbors. I mean, I remember even when I was growing up, your neighbors knew you. Your neighbor, if I was down the street and I was doing something I wasn't supposed to,
They can step in.
Okay, yes, Miss Henderson would say, "I saw you," or tell my parents or what have you, and we don't have that today. And but what I'm, moving towards when we talk about, freeing returning citizens when they get out, even before they get in, but when they get out, there needs to be a community of people that would support, love, help. Say, what can I do to help you be able to stay out here and have the support you need so that you can sustain a life?
Yeah, but that's true. That's one of the things that you have to deal with, that you have to have that community that you're coming back to. But then you also have the stigma that society has placed on, you're sort of put in a bracket. Once you're in jail, you're labeled, you have a name tag, you have, it's on your record. You can't get jobs easily because you have to report it. Sometimes even housing is a problem. You're confined, you're restrained to certain areas depending on the offense that led you, into the system. So now you have all these things, these barriers that does not allow you to be freely reintegrated because you have these things. And because you have those records, even the neighborhood can also verify and say, okay, this is an offender, so now they don't feel like I necessarily have to support this person because that is, but they don't take into consideration that you may have gone through all these programs, to rebuild your life, or you want a second chance at life. Society is even harder on the people than the system, even sometimes, because they're judging you.
That's true. And people, I mean, everyone deserves a second chance.
Right.
Someone would say, well, why should we give somebody that's been incarcerated a second chance? Well, it's the same. How would you feel about your own self if you did something wrong and no one would ever
Hear you out,
or let it go forever? They've said that you are forever going to have to pay for that mistake that you made for the rest of your life.
Right.
And that's really why I often say that returning citizens, ex-offenders are they receive a life sentence even after they're out, because for life people still have that stigma and negative perception about who they are.
So cleaning that working up, it's a whole it's a whole cycle.
Yes.
So many people have to be involved in the process, from the family units to the society to professionals, but your program taps into different facets of that. You touch into like the employee. You have programs where you talk to employers on how to employ these people, how to employ the returnees.
Right.
And then there are also programs in the facilities to prepare them for when they come back when they come out into the society, what are they being faced with? Right.
So 3 primary things. Resource and Release is a book that I authored, and it is training that looks at giftings, planning, how to be clear about SMART goals in terms of once you are preparing to come out into society, as well as returning citizens can use that same material to begin thinking about what do I need to do now I'm out, what networks do I have,
options
what are my options that I need. The work that we do with employers, as well as could be community members, it could be schools, is called the experience simulation. So it's actual workshop that simulates the life of a returning citizen. So for 1 hour you take on the role of an ex-offender, and you're trying to look for a job, get your ID, you're discriminated with housing, all of those things.
Wow.
And then after that hour you debrief about your experience, and then it is a call to action how we can help be able to change some things in that community. So it could be within that employer, or it could be within housing or community members. And then And then we have a workshop, or kind of a, I shouldn't say workshop, it's like facilitated sessions for families, because we really believe that the family needs as much support, or even maybe sometimes more support than the returning citizen, because they are partners with the ex-offender in trying to get back on tracks.
They are.
Right.
I mean, the family is the core unit, because when the offense first happens, the family is the one that takes the burden. I mean, you may go in there, you're dealing with other elements, but the family on the outside, usually sometimes they're your support system, your money, you know, how they send you money, how they support you emotionally, psychologically sometimes, because their facilities are not really doing a lot of that. But when you know that you have external support, that your family still believes in you, visitations, and then it leads to broken homes for people who are parents, or you have children, their spouses, broken relationships, broken marriages. You know, some people are incarcerated for so many years, your relationship cannot last, cannot sustain as much as you want to. But now even the what is the vows, the relationships that allow visitations,
right.
for marital couples, some facilities don't even let you do that anymore. So you don't have any physical contact with your spouse. I mean, how long is that going to last? Those relationships usually end up broken as well. So
they are. And I mean, we, you know, right now we've got 2.5 million, you know, people that are incarcerated in this country.
It's just ridiculous.
I mean, that alone, but you know, I think to me as alarming is the 4.5 million returning citizens or ex-offenders. So you've got 4.5 million that have been in, now out, now under supervision. Okay, so controlled by
parole. Some of them are in parole.
Right, exactly. And then you've got those that are incarcerated. But back to the point about the family unit, the trauma that hits the family, maybe the wife, girlfriend, the children. What is it? It's like 87% of children that have parents that are incarcerated are likely to be incarcerated.
Yes.
So the cycle
or
continues.
They do poorly in education. They suffer emotionally.
Exactly.
And so it affects other aspects of their upbringing, of their growth.
Right. And so we, the African American community and Hispanics have been, you know, hit hard as well, but primarily us. We are, we're in crises. We really are. And you can see, I mean, even if you think of the African American woman that is desperately trying to hold the family together, in the midst of trying to raise her children, put money on the books of, you know, and her then, man. You know,
who can so now not only do you have the men who are incarcerated,
right.
Of that percentage of people, 40%, you know, over 40% is black population that's in there. So you have over 1 million people in jail facilities that are black, and we're only 12% of the population of the U.S. population. So comparing that to the white population, and you have 40% of the 12% in jail.
Right.
I mean, that's a problem.
It is a problem.
And these are adult population. This is the adult population. We're not even looking at the juvenile population. So the young men, there's a disadvantage. There's already a disparity in age. You have 47% male, 53% women in general, based on census.
Right.
So now there's a shortage of men, and then you have that population in jail, and women are not being paid equal pay with men. Right. So these women are underpaid, supporting families, single mothers, and then you have child support. I mean, just like a system that does not seem to end, a cycle that does not really see. It's like once you get trapped in, it's like bad credit almost. Like once you have bad credit, it's almost like you don't know how to get out of it.
Right. And I mean, and I think that is the whole purpose really of our work is number one, to educate. Because I think a lot of people really are just, I mean, ignorant. They do not have the knowledge to know that even the data is even out there. You know, we get locked into our own lives and say, you know, me, you know, my for no more, whatever it is that we're doing our own lives. But we have a community of people all around us that are struggling, and we need to be concerned about that because it is, you know, it's impacted us in a great way.
it ultimately impacts us. Whether it does not have to affect you directly.
That's right.
But it eventually, if a friend of yours is going through that crisis, you're ultimately affected because you have to listen to them, you have to hear them out. So I mean, it's a community. So everybody has to find a way to fit in into
and
this
help
and find a solution. Really.
That's right. And I believe, you know, one of the things I was thinking about, you know, how can people help?
Yes, I think that's a big thing. Well, how can people really help?
Right, what can they do? So, you know, one of the things is, you know, I said open the doors. That when I say open the doors, and what I mean by that is every person has some way or an opportunity to be able to open the door for someone else. So I think of a community door. If the community has a bias against returning citizens, they can shut people out. So if somebody tries to live there, either they can't, you know, because of the housing, or the neighbors are cold to them, and so they close them off.
Right.
So, you know, opening the doors in terms of jobs.
It's almost like a community saying, we don't want the school to be built in a neighborhood, or we don't want this park to, we don't want this company.
We don't want low income housing.
Or transitional housing.
That's right. That's right.
You know, people don't
Halfway
want halfway
house.
housing.
Yes.
And stuff,
Right.
You know, and now like they are where it's basically for homeless shelters. They build in transitional houses in every ward. You know, the mayor. And that's not for returning citizens. It could be, but but that's the things that will help returning citizens. Some place that go to get stabilized, and then, you know, to learn how to live.
Exactly.
But remember when I went to Second Genesis, I didn't know how to live. I had to learn how to live, you know, the right way.
I mean, you see, I think that's a fundamental statement right there.
It really is.
Because that's something you take for granted. I mean, if you've been removed from this side, number one, you've lived in confinement, you've lived by certain rules, get up at this time, do things like you're used to being told. And now you have to go back to independent, like trusting that you are equipped for that. And here you are saying you have to learn it.
And it takes time.
It takes time.
And so as soon as you get out, you're not going to be immediately going to be able to get a job. Number one, you may not have any skills. You probably don't have the right clothes. You don't, even the mentality. I remember someone was talking about how, you know, your point of always having to be told when to go to the bathroom, told when to get up, when to, you know, eat, that coming out, you get to decide.
Right.
It's a completely different mentality than when you were inside. So that is something else that has to be learned, and people on the outside often
and trusting that you're making the right decisions.
You know,
That's right.
where a lot of them end up in homeless shelters. You know, the homeless shelter on Second and D is another incarceration, another form of incarceration. We used to go in there and provide a service. You know, in the homeless shelter on Second and D, what I've been told is the largest shelter in the United States.
Wow.
You know, and a lot of those people that live there, they're institutionalized. You know, they get jobs in there. You know, people bring all these donated clothes. They get, you know, food.
Wow.
You know, and that's where they comfortable. You know, and they don't want, it's 1,200 beds in Second and D. And it's 13 homeless shelters in D.C., and that's the largest. You know, and most
1,200 beds.
1,200 beds. And most
And it's not like a permanent location, right? You still have to go and come back, or is your position permanent? Because some of the shelters, you have to check out and come back every night.
Right. There's one on New York Avenue that they have to leave every morning unless it's hypothermia. But the one at Second and D is so many I guess divisions or whatever. You know, you got to part with women. You know, they part with like detox, the people just coming in on the street, and all these people separated, and they ain't got to part with women that's returning to work or trying to get a job. You know, but then if you drive by there, like I drove by there today, you know, it's like the corner. You know, so they walk out that door and they right in the mix of all this stuff.
Exactly.
Right.
So
Just
you're still trying to get help, but you're coming right into it. So it's like there's no way out. You're still like trapped.
And I was just thinking about, you know, why you said how they feel comfortable there, but a lot of them don't have anywhere to go.
Yes.
So
You
they
may have
needed
also
it,
lost a loved one while you're in there. You know, sometimes most people, I found out that most people are also maybe depending on grandma, grandpa.
That's right.
And then by the time you come out, you probably weren't raised by your own parents because maybe they were too busy out there in life, and you were raised by your grandparents. And by the time you come out of the system, they're gone, and now you're completely lost. You know, or even if you go back to mom and dad, they never really had that relationship or that bond with you, so they don't have that tolerance to really nurture you
and
or support you.
And if you go, let's say you go back to the grandma, which a lot of times there were grandparents that were raising their children because of the crack epidemic. The grandparent doesn't have the skill set
anymore
to even try to help them.
Fragile.
Right, to help. Actually, they need the child, the grandchild, son, who's coming out maybe 30 years old, needs to be helping the grandma and does not have the money or income or skills to be able to get a good job.
Wow, my God. Listen, guys, if you're just joining in, please make sure you share the cast. We are talking about second chances for returnees, people who have unfortunately had to serve time, but they're coming back into society. They're being reintegrated, and they're relearning the skills and traits. And I have Sheila here, who actually has developed programs that help these individuals who are returning citizens into society. And the conversation is quite interesting. So make sure you share. And Gerard also is speaking from the perspective of having been on the other side, and how, you know, seeing life now with having been a benefactor of the programs that are in place. So make sure you share and tag and invite people. And if you want to call into the studio, you can do that. We are on 240-429-9247. You can call us and ask any questions that you have to both of them, or you can easily write your questions on the chat as well. So yes, go ahead.
So, and I think, you know, the work right now is helping really change the mentality, because I really believe that when you change people's attitudes, their behaviors follow.
Right.
And so that's for returning citizens, that's for inmates, and it's for what I call outmates, which are people on the outside that are imprisoned by their own biases, their own prejudice.
mental enslavement is also
exactly.
It's more dangerous even.
Right, and don't even realize that they are incarcerating a group of people unfairly, unjustly. And so, you know, freeing returning citizens is what we're focused on, being able to open these doors and look for opportunities for everyone to be able to be involved. Everyone can do something, even just by not speaking negatively. We were talking earlier about how sometimes if you mention something about someone that's been in jail, the person's whole demeanor will change. Like, oh, you know. And so just that alone is something that people can tweak. They can start learning more about, you know, what's going on.
Being more sensitive towards those topics.
Right.
But one thing that I want us to be aware of is the number, the statistics.
Okay.
And you should be aware that if the numbers are that high, you have 40% of 12% of people that have a record. You should understand that basically what you're really saying is 1 in 3.
Yes.
People have some kind of record. This should no longer be a conversation that brings shame. It should be a conversation that is about how can we beat this system. This is a systemic, it's almost like it's an epidemic. Like, how can we figure out how to resolve that problem? It's like HIV. If you don't have the conversations and begin to engage people, you cannot solve the problem. We should have open conversations and look at the root cause.
You're raising a really good point. Instead of us feeling shame, we actually should be angry or frustrated. This is a targeted
community. I mean, they talk about the rate of arrest. I mean, if you had 10 people here, how come the number of are you saying the other population is not committing crimes? If you've painted a group of people in a particular way and you've conditioned the minds of the officers to believe, I mean, look at just how many shootings we've had of black people, you know, being shot by police officers. So they're immediately trained to see that as you see a black person, they're immediately guilty and they're not given a chance.
Right.
So if anything, but here's the guy, the kid in Florida shooting, the school shooting. I mean, they take their time. They see the guy. They know, you know, they take him. They pamper him. They arrest him. oh, we're trying to think he's
Right,
probably
different.
emotional. You know what I mean? But if had that been a different image, he would have been gone down.
Right.
So I can give you a better example. I saw an article or something on the internet where they had two young men, the same age, committed the same crime. One of them got probation, and one of them got like 10 years.
Wow.
And one of them was black, one of them was white. And you know which one got the 10 years.
Of course.
Right.
It goes without saying. I mean, the records are there so many times. Even when it's the white guy that commits the crime, they always, if they were going to serve time, it's never the same sentence. It's just never the same. There's always an excuse. And when they give the sentences, sometimes the bail fees are so high, so ridiculous that you cannot bail yourself out. You
And
cannot
families are
afford.
poor.
Yeah, they give you so many counts on your offenses that you can't really afford a good lawyer. So you are already positioned to be trapped in the system. They don't give that you're not at the same starting point as the white guy. It's just the reality.
Right.
Because the statistics don't lie. I mean, I was looking at some of the statistics, and they talk about just one of the things that you talk about being a victim of the recidivism.
Recidivism.
Right. The ability to continuously repeat the offense.
Right.
It talks about the younger you are, the more the chances of returning. And the older, exactly. And as they grew older, the less. I mean, it actually says that the less time you serve, the more times you could go back on the same crimes. And as they grew older, the probability to return was less because of course you're more mature, you're more aware of the consequences, the impact that it has, so it decreases. But it's just that the scenarios that we just painted here are showing that you're coming back to the same scenario. There's nothing new.
So I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
But if you look around Washington D.C. where I live, the areas that I went back to are no longer there. Where because a different group of people living in those areas now.
Right.
So those corners where we hung, and did our crimes and whatever, they are shrinking. They're disappearing.
Okay.
So
that's a good thing.
Right. So when the people that's returning come back, when they go in it's like a shock. You
don't recognize the place anymore.
Right. It's just a matter of time before they go back.
They feel like
if they don't have any help, support.
Network and support.
Right.
and then they feel like everything I knew is no longer there. You feel lost in the system, like lost.
Well, if you go away and then you come back, you're going to your familiar neighborhood, and your neighborhood there's no longer the stores.
Exchange is being bought by
other
a
people.
white developer.
Right, that's true. Right, and you
white
can't
people
afford
sitting outside,
right, and
Yeah.
they're walking their dogs.
It has new street names, and you're like, okay, what happened? Like, it's almost like your whole history is erased. You're like, I'm better off in that place where I have some friends. You feel like the people, the inmates are your friends now. They're your new family.
I got to go back.
Yeah.
And it's sad, but that's the feeling some of them getting. And I suspect that the guy that I referenced earlier, that the one that came out after serving like 20 years and couldn't get a job, I guess in his mind, the heck with this, I need to go back. And he did things to because if you break the law so many times, you're gonna get caught. And you're gonna go to jail.
Eventually.
And the other thing I want to say is that we, as black people, we've bought into being afraid of our own people. So that's another issue. So
that's a bigger issue.
It is.
Because that even happens between African and African Americans. Because as African and immigrant community, you come here, and first of all, when you're out of the country, you're coming in and you have a different perception of what Black America is. And then you come in and then you're like, oh, okay, it's really not what I thought it was.
Right.
It's not as glamorous, because what you see is the ebonies and all the Cosby shows, all the, the fancy shows.
Right.
And then you get in here and you realize, okay, there's homelessness, there's poverty, there's gang violence, there's drugs,
Right.
there's abuse, and then media doesn't help. So then there's a divide. So now you leave us two separate communities. And in all the statistics, we didn't even look at the immigrant population that is also finding themselves in these facilities as
caught
well.
up. That's right.
Being caught up. And they are even more disadvantaged because, they're coming with language barriers sometimes, with cultural differences, names. And so when you look at those things, they are being judged even more, they are more disadvantaged. Like they're being judged, they're judging them more as an immigrants and illegal, DACA, undocumented, all of that category victimizes them even further than even the Africans. So it's like the scale just keeps dropping even lower. The question though is, with all these alarming rates, I looked at a stat that says the number of people incarcerated in America today is larger than the population, than the people incarcerated in India, about 7 or 8 countries combined. And India has 1.2 billion people. America only has like what, 6 point something, like how many million people?
Right. And we're incarcerating more people than any country
in the world.
In the world.
And America is not the most populated country.
Right.
But it's a business, and it's
a business.
It's a show,
that's why.
That documentary that came out, I think it's got some letters and numbers in the title.
The 13th Amendment. 13th.
Oh yes. It tells.
And it's based on the 13th Amendment. Yeah, that's a movie or documentary that people need to see.
Yeah, there are a few documentaries on that talk about the history. Like I think it started with the slave. It's like a different form of slavery. It's like because they figured black all that plantation work, they just converted it and changed it into, we're just going to find ways to keep putting them in a position where they're disenfranchised.
Right.
They're longer. If you don't have resources, eventually you're going to find yourself in crime.
Right. They would, but with that documentary, they was showing, they was highlighting where when it started for money, when the slavery got cut out the picture and they wasn't making money off the slaves, then they started arresting black men
for
almost anything.
Looking at white women,
and then
whistling,
spitting on the road.
Yeah.
But then they made them slaves.
Talking in public. I mean, just ridiculous things.
And
go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, and we have to take back our power and authority. Or maybe we feel like maybe we never had it, but we cannot just keep allowing things to happen. We have to make a decision to say, what can we do differently? And we can rise up and we can combine as a community and say that we are not going to be afraid of ourselves. We're not going to be afraid of immigrants. We're not going to be afraid of our children. People say, oh, I don't know what's going to happen with these young people. No, these young people are our children.
And what happens to them is still part of your statistics.
Exactly.
Whether you separate yourself from it or not,
That's right.
It is part of your statistics. So you might as well contribute to a better number
Exactly.
than taking yourself away from it
And learn.
So we need more people like Sheila, and I'm saying that in the sense that she's out there on the front line, and it's a lot of people like me,
right,
waiting to be asked to contribute.
Wow.
And just don't know how. I know it's a purpose for me. My story is a purpose.
It is. I mean, what you shared today, is priceless. You are a positive story of that people can truly be transformed.
That's right.
And it starts with the mind. Once you committed to yourself, said to yourself, "I'm ready to change," it happened.
Right.
It happened, and here you are being a mentor. Exactly.
Right.
And here you are being a mentor to others.
That's right.
So Sheila, the key thing here is, how can people, someone who's listening, maybe you have a family member who is in the system today or is about to be a returnee, or what are the resources that they have that they can plug into? How can they find you? How can they figure out how to get this resource? I mean, how can people locate you guys?
Right. So I'd love for people, one of the main things I really want people to be able to do is to share their stories. We are really building a case around how there are so many, positive stories that are in our communities to help show that we do not need to be afraid and that we need to embrace, we need to help returning citizens, and we need to help inmates on the inside so that they can be prepared when they come out. Go to Patreon.com.
Spell Patreon for people who...
Yes, Patreon.com. Free returning citizens. So that's free returning citizens. So you can go to that page so you can hear the stories. You can add. You have stories out there. We want you to send them to you or to us, and then go to the website with Mission to Mobilization, missiontomobilization.com, and that way we can talk about ways that we can come in, do some work with your communities, and help build stronger communities for returning citizens.
Wow. Did you have any other thing to add to that? I mean, you said there are people like you who want to help, and how can they find it? Do you know any organizations that people can tap into to be of a positive,
Right.
be a positive resource?
I don't have an affiliation with any organization, but I heard a lot about Catholic charities. Some of my friends, work there, and it helped some of my friends or some of the people I know, not to go back to jail.
Right.
And I know they have volunteers, but in that, so the role model, and I was telling Sheila earlier, the examples, and I guess the videos on your website and all that will show examples. And when I was clean for a while and working, and I got a part-time job at Second Justice, the transitional facility that I was in, I graduated from, and I was working there, and one of the young men, because I was telling Sheila, she probably helped a lot of people that she don't even know, and
God bless you for the work you do.
Thank you.
We're wrapping up. We're almost.
Said, one of the young men said, "Thank you. I really admire what you do. You really helped me."
Wow.
And I didn't know.
So sometimes just living your life, it's an example, it's a lesson enough. I just want you guys to be aware of the fact that there are so many statistics out there. Be aware of the disparities. And if you know someone who is going through a trial, but do not take it for granted, because even the sentencing guidelines are not fair. Just make sure that you have multiple people to re-examine the cases. Don't think that, because once they get into the system, a lot of times they force people to do plea bargains. But in those plea bargains are embedded charges that eventually make your life really rigorous and ridiculous when it's time to return home. So be supportive. If you know someone it's as challenging, it's difficult for families are struggling, be supportive wherever you can. Tap into Sheila's organization. You can support in many ways. Financially, you can actually volunteer. There's so many ways that you can do. Sometimes write letters, find an organization that can go out and visit, prayers, so many things. She is a woman of faith as well. In her organization. You've traveled a lot. We didn't even get a chance to talk about it. I feel like we need a part 2. There are a lot of stats. And guys, if you want to know more, there's a blog on my page, dDTAlksmedia.com, that talks about this article. So go there, follow the blog, and write your comments and feedback, and let's continue the conversation offline. And so I want to thank you so much, Sheila, for the great work that you're doing. This is a path less traveled. A lot of people don't choose this, but out of compassion, you've chosen that. And I'm glad that you're touching and blessing lives in many ways. May God continue to strengthen you and bless the work that you do.
Thank you so much.
Amen.
Yes, amen. And for Gerard, thank you so much for being a positive example, for proving that society can actually, that you... to not being a statistics, to prove that the statistics can be reversed.
Right.
That you're a living example of things like this. Just keep being a role model. The young kids, you never know who's watching today, who's listening, and that is truly possible. You went out there and had a judge take a chance on you, and you proved your worth. So I want to thank everybody who has been watching or listening. Make sure you share the cast. Listen, I always like to sign off by saying, if no one has told you that they love you, who loves you more is your girl Diane. And I love you passionately with the love of God. Make sure you like my page, you follow, and you tag. Again, the blog is dDTAlksmedia.com. And that's it for today. It's a wrap. Take care, guys. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to WBGR World Network.